Willie, tell us about your business and what's limiting its growth right now.
Yeah, sure. I'm in the real estate development business here in Boston. I have been for 20 years now in different phases. So we mostly buy rundown multifamilies here in the New England area. Everything's a triple decker, three family, as you will. So we buy a lot of those residential buildings, fix them up, and then rent them out and hold on to them. We own about 130 units right now, company wide. And I would say, like I said, we're our biggest constraints right now is really just kind of going into the hiring and firing. It's tough at the end of the day to find a lot of people that can stick it out in this business at the end of the day.
Hiring and firing. So talent is the biggest constraint. That's interesting. I was not expecting that for a real estate development company, but okay, we'll do a deep dive pretty soon. But before we do, tell us about the goals. What was the revenue 2025 and what's the target, say 2028?
Yeah, so quick numbers, I would say our revenue 2025 was just under 4 million.
Okay.
And the goal is I would say to double that in the next 5 years, is
Okay.
is really the goal. So
All right. So you said real estate development in Boston, multifamily, usually three. You said triple decker, right? Three
triple
family.
deckers, yeah, that's what they call them here in New England, triple deckers.
Yeah. Okay. How do you source these? How do you find these properties?
Yeah, sure. Mostly it's networking, getting out there, putting your name out there. We do a lot of educational events as well. So newer investors coming into the business, real estate agents. We just continue to educate. We have a platform here in Boston called Boston Wealth Builders. Been running it for 12 years now, and we have at least 4 or 5 meetings a month where we either are on a Zoom educating people about real estate opportunities within real estate, the financial literacy space, or taking it a step further and bringing those individuals out to our construction projects and showing them firsthand what it looks like to take something apart and put it back together. And I think those rehab tours, what we call them, tend to be a lot more popular and a lot more beneficial to the crowd. When you're sitting on a Zoom, it's great, you're learning, but when you're actually getting out to the site and seeing rough plumbing going in, rough electrical going in the actual guts of a building, it kind of sparks a lot of questions that may not have been had on a Zoom call.
I see. So you have an education side of the business as well?
We do. And it started off more because, young black man in America, I'm getting into the business. This is in my opinion, and again, I think even 20 years ago when I was getting in, and it still is probably today, it's a white male dominated industry, here in the States and the development space specifically. You don't see a lot of people of color throwing up buildings, from the ground up. So the educational piece was sparked by me saying, hey, if I'm going to, dive into this business, I think the visibility of me is important. I think the visibility of the other people of color, women in the business doing things is important. So we put this platform together to show other people, hey, there are other people in the business that look like you that are doing these things. You can do it too. And here's specifically how you do it. So
yeah. The 4 million revenue how would you split that between development versus education?
Let me correct that. So $4 million revenue is when we do development, we primarily are keeping everything in house, right? So we don't build for clients. We build for ourselves, our own personal portfolio. So the things that we're building is we're buying land, we're building a multifamily, a 2, a 4, a 6 unit building on that development site, and then retaining that within our rental portfolio. So when I say 4 million in revenue, that is primarily rental income. That is strictly rental income because we don't source any clients outside for our development business.
Oh, I see. Okay. So you buy land and you develop from scratch, and then so that's one, and then you also do fix and flips.
And we also fix and hold. We call it's the BRRRR strategy. We describe it as
fix and hold. Yeah.
Fix and hold. So we describe it as the BRRRR strategy. It's basically what we're trying to do is buy, rehab, rent, and then refinance is essentially our business model. So we'll find existing stock within our business, our target markets. We tell our realtors, you said, how do I source our deal? We tell our realtors, we're not looking for anything that's rent ready. You will not find me buying a building where you can walk in comfortably and take some pictures and walk out. We're looking for things where the roof is leaking, the furnace, there's no heat, rats running through the building, homeless people sleeping there, bad tenants, evictions, whatever it may be. We want the things that scare other people away. We buy those buildings at a discount, put our knowledge, our investment into those buildings, and then turn them over, refinance them into lower cost money, and then retain them within our portfolio.
I see. And why is finding a fixer upper important? Is it because it's just you have a bigger alpha, bigger profit in those
It is.
deals?
It is our profit margin. So part of the BRRRR strategy is it's the velocity of money, right? If your average investor is buying a rental property, they're taking, and here in Boston, and again, numbers may be different across the country or wherever you are, internationally as well. But let's say here in Boston, our average triple decker, just to use really clean numbers, is $1 million, right? So $200,000 or 20% down. You put that $200,000 down, your money is really stuck in that property until the property appreciates or you go and sell it at some point in the future, right? So your money is not moving fast. Your velocity is at a low velocity at that point. What we like to do is we like to buy the rehab properties, because our typical business model is this: we would buy at 700,000. We are investing $200,000 into that building. The building is now worth 1.2 million. So we've created an equity spread there. We're creating value right off from the start of the construction to the completion to the rent up. We have value, and we're able to go back to the banks now and pull our capital back out, because the banks have a comfortable spread where they can give us a new loan on that $1.2 million property where we only owe 900,000 on it, if that makes sense.
Okay, so you're buying for 200K, and then you're putting
700. So we buy for 7, we'll rehab for another 2. So we'll invest 200 in
okay.
renovations. So
I
we're into
see.
the building for 9, but we've created a building that's now worth 1.2. So we were invested 9, it's worth 1.2. We can now go and refinance that real estate loan, pull our money back out, because the banks feel comfortable. They have a nice spread on that deal. Whereas if you're buying a $1.2 million property for $1.2 million, you're not going to be able to pull your capital back out. Pulling our capital back out immediately 6 to 9 months later allows us to do volume, allows us to go out and build that portfolio, and hopefully double in size like we intend to do.
Wait, help me understand. So if you're buying a 1.2, I'm guessing you're not going to buy on market, right? You're still finding some, like say 80 to 90%. You're going to make, say, like 80% offer. And because I know some investors do this, right? They look at on market deals. They have no intention of doing like a major fix or major, like they don't want to put a ton of money in it. So they would make like offers like at 80% all day long, and someone will accept, right? And then so they have like that 20% cushion, right?
That is, again, I understand your strategy and I understand those investors' strategy, but their money is still going to be stuck in there. We don't make offers. We make offers assuming that the property, let's say the ARV, or the after repair value, is $1.2 million. We're making offers at 50 to 60% of that ARV. That's exactly why we need stuff where you're going to be scared when you walk in. That's the stuff that we're looking for. We're looking for, if you can walk in comfortably, that's not for us. If it needs some paint and a new kitchen, that's not what we're looking for. Your average Home Depot, Steve Smith can make that happen. What we're looking for is the roof is caving in, there's sewage backup, there is just a disaster. We want you to walk in. The average home buyer, or the average person, is going to walk in and be completely frightened. We're making offers at 50 to 60 cents on the dollar of the ARV, because it's stuff that most people would not be able to take on themselves. That we're creating value through our strategic construction, and then having a comfortable margin on the other end of that 20%.
You said 50% of ARV. What is the percentage you would say, like more or less, compared to its current market value? Is it like 80% of current value, or
Yeah, I would say that it's tough to determine its current market value, because it needs so much work that they're not. It's not like we have especially here in Boston. There may be some other cities like this, but we're not like we have properties in disrepair on every single corner. So it's difficult to say, okay, yeah, that one was rat infested, building as well. Here's a comparable to that, right? So a lot of it is going to go, is not necessarily on its current value. it's on its future fixed up value, or that ARV. It's very difficult to have enough comparables or enough comps based on its current disrepair state.
Right. Usually, is it easy to find properties like this in the
No,
Boston area?
no, we spend a lot of money and a lot of time and effort, and that's part of what we talked about. Is the retention is hard because you're not, when we hire an acquisitions manager, they're probably picking up two, three, four, five buildings a year, and that's working full time. I mean, a lot of times we're getting shot down. I mean, I just put an offer in a building for, 7.25 yesterday. The seller wants 775. That $50,000 difference just doesn't work for us. So we get shot down a lot. This is a volume based thing that we're doing here. And sometimes that seller will come right back to us. But to answer your question, they're not readily available. Boston is a very high price market. We have some of the best schools here, best hospitals here. MIT is here, Harvard is here, BU, BC, Northeastern, Mass Eye and Ear, some of the best medical institutions in the world as well. Rents are high. People come and stay here. It's a very competitive market. So you
Mm,
spend a lot of money on marketing. You spend a lot of time on marketing and acquisitions. But when we do find something, our job is to be steady, stick to our numbers. And when we do find something, it tends to be relatively successful.
I see. How do you? So you mentioned, you're looking at properties people would be like scared to go into.
Mhm.
Clearly that's a bad neighborhood, right?
It's not, I wouldn't say a bad neighborhood. I would say it was an owner who, a lot of times, it could be a bad neighborhood, but it could also just be an owner who was elderly, who a lot of times bought these multifamilies, and, family lived in them, and then the family just didn't help out. There could be, so a lot of times things snowball. You have what we tend to buy a lot is, let's say a tree fell on a roof and it punctured the roof, and the family is in need of money. Their insurance company gives them $20,000 to fix the roof, but they take $20,000 and go spend it elsewhere, a new car, a new
Mm,
whatever it may be. And then the situation snowballs from there. The roof is leaking, which causes mold, which causes health issues, which causes further damage in the floorboards, which then people just stop taking care of the property, and then it's plumbing leaks and everything else, and nobody else in the family wants to invest. So a lot of times it's not necessarily the neighborhood that's bad; it's the snowball of the disrepair that will catch up with a potential owner.
okay. But every now and then you would buy like in a shady
Buying
neighborhood, right?
neighborhoods is buying. We own in some of the worst in Boston. Again, I've traveled a lot throughout the states, and the worst of Boston is still pretty pretty decent neighborhoods. I mean,
Okay.
but yeah, we have, I would say, a good portion of our portfolio is in the lower end of the Boston neighborhoods. Right, though we have Northeastern students in some of our buildings, the bulk of our tenant base are subsidized housing, Section 8 housing, and otherwise in other neighborhoods.
Right. Well, the intention of the question was if you're buying in less than ideal neighborhoods and you're putting in like say 200 300K in
Mhm.
fixing it up, does it sometimes become hard to attract tenants because it's like a shady neighborhood?
No, because at the end of the day, it's still Boston, and that's the thing that we have going for us. It's a very attractive community, a very attractive city. We have more people looking for housing than we have housing available, and that's been like that as long as I've been a landlord. The hardest part here is finding development opportunities. The hardest part here is finding land, finding the buildings that are in disrepair. Um, it's in recent years, and I want to steer away from some of the politics here, but in recent years, we've had some trouble with our international community because of fears of deportation and green cards and everything else. So the Northeastern, I attended Northeastern myself. I would say that most of my classes were 60% international. I'm not sure if that ratio is still the same there now, but I would imagine that some of the rhetoric that we hear in the news and the politics has kept some of those people away. So we've seen rentals in those neighborhoods stabilize versus continuing to go up every year. But we typically don't have, if you have a decent product on the market, it's clean, it's safe, it's livable. You will not have problems in Boston trying to rent it out.
Hmm. Okay, fair enough. You mentioned you spend a lot of money in marketing. What kind of marketing is it? Like direct mail, Facebook ads, stuff like that?
We've done everything over the years. I would say in the beginning of my career, direct mail was probably the most advantageous. Again, 20 years, rewind 20 years ago, I started this business in 2006. For those of you who are old enough to remember, 2007 stock market crash, 2008 housing market was doing really, really poorly. The first purchase I bought, I probably lost $60,000 in value within 24 months. But like many great investors, I paid attention to Warren Buffett and some of the other people. You know, when things are going poorly, you don't run away. You opt to buy more. You dive in. I did the same thing in the stock market after COVID. I did the same thing in the real estate market. Very difficult to do, but did the same thing in the real estate market. Made some of our best purchases in 2010, 2011, 2012. Then marketing was a little bit less competitive. Direct mail worked. It stopped working as the market started to tick up. We did everything from bandit signs to door knocking to direct calls. Then lead pages and Facebook marketing really started to take hold. We lost a lot of our ground there because a lot of investors were competing online. We had to learn that segment. We built hundreds of lead pages with lead capture tools like, do you want to know what your housing or your house is worth in the neighborhood of Dorchester in Boston? Click here to get a free report on your housing. That was one of the the lead pages that generated a lot for us. Get a conversation going with the seller. Today, where we are today, we are large enough in the residential space in Boston where the majority of our leads come from networking, real estate agents, wholesalers, or other developers in the business who know what we do and can't necessarily, I wouldn't say can't, but let's say if they get multiple leads, hey, we can only take on one deal. Let's give Willie and his team a call and see if they want to take this over from us. We either pay them some type of referral fee or we partner with them, on the potential deal. So it's been a progression is I guess the answer to your question. It's gone everything from direct mail to today we are more of an inbound networking lead generation system.
Hmm. So if anyone is starting out right now, they're like have a massive disadvantage compared to you then, right?
I would say so, but I mean, there's also I mean, I think that's in any industry and any business, right? If you're big and you're strong and you're powerful and you have cash, you're immovable, right? I mean, or not immovable. I mean, but I mean, you can't move as quickly. You can't pivot as quickly. You can't adjust to market conditions. If there's a great opportunity in single room housing or single room occupancy right now, it's difficult for me at my size to adjust and move my business into that space where someone brand new can certainly do that. We have a new soccer stadium being built here right next to a casino in the neighborhood of Everett. I don't know Everett. I haven't invested there. A new investor could pivot their business straight to Everett and really take advantage of that growth within that community. So large, small, there are always advantages to being new. There are always advantages to being big and powerful. You just have to find your space and take advantage, David and Goliath style.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I like it. How do you find contractors? Like you mentioned, most of the value add is fixing up the buildings, right? So are these also coming from your network? You have worked with the same contractors for years, or do you have like a strategy?
No, they are. We don't go and shop for different contractors. We try to retain as much as possible the same contractors. They understand what we want. Every once in a while, we have to let somebody go, terminate somebody. Um, we also have different tiers of contractors as well. We know that if we're doing, and this is hopefully, my plumber's not listening, but hopefully, like I said, we understand that if we're doing a three-family quick turnover, what we call kind of a cleanup job, then there are certain plumbers that we're going to use for that. That's what they're qualified for. If we're putting a 6-unit building together from scratch, and let's call it 6,000 square feet, that guy is not going to make the cut. We need somebody a little bit more experienced, a larger team, a bigger crew. So we have different tiers of contractors that we use depending on the job. The big guy we're not going to use for the small cleanup because his margins are going to be too large. He's going to be 20 to 30% higher than the smaller guy who really wants the job, has a smaller crew, a little bit more aggressive in his pricing. So it's a revolving door. We're never done hiring. We're always looking for new skilled people to join the team, join the crew. But we've through the 20 years that we've been doing this has also built up some good relationships within the neighborhood as well.
Yeah. When you were talking about your constraint hiring and firing, were you talking about contractors or were you referring to something else?
Everyone. It's difficult to retain contractors, property managers. Property managers was primarily what I was referring to. We have it takes a certain ability to manage property, manage people. What people don't understand is there are a lot of people that want to get into this business and they say, "Hey, I want to be a rental property investor and I want to have passive income and I want to be, a landlord." But what they don't understand is, in order to do so, you really have to have a well-rounded person. And by that I mean you have to have somebody who is really consistent, persistent, and can wait for particular deals on the front end during the acquisitions phase. You have to have somebody who really knows their numbers. Once they find something, can they crunch the numbers, not be impatient, know how to negotiate with banks, present themselves well to banks. You have to have somebody who's well spoken. You have to have somebody who's not afraid to dive in and get their hands dirty. Construction is not easy. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to find things behind the walls. During the tenant lease up phase, tenants are a whole nother ball game, and this is where we lose a lot of people, is because you're gonna have some rough days. You're gonna have some days where you're just coasting, and a lot of days where it was like yesterday. I was running around. We had 16, 17 maintenance issues basically come in, and within a few hours, you're gonna get yelled at. You're going to get told that you're a slumlord or whatever it may be. There's a lot of psychology. I took a couple psychology courses in class, and I wish I would have in college, and I wish I would have taken more. I read a ton of books on managing personalities and different personality types. So you really need to be a well-rounded person. And on the property management side, you're kind of touching upon all of that stuff as an employee with us. And that's where we tend to lose people is, can you be that well-rounded person that it takes to be a landlord property manager in the space.
Yeah, I completely hear you. So we buy and sell vacant land all over the US. We have done 700 plus deals. So I recently started teaching people, like I do like mentorship. Um, and so when I go to podcasts, I tell them the realities. You need to be good at marketing, you need to be good at sales, you need to be good at acquisition. You have
Yep.
to learn how to talk to people properly. You have to build relationships, right? And compared to my competitors who are also in this space, and they're like, well, pay me 9 grand and you'll be a millionaire in 6 months, right? and,
Yep.
and then they don't tell the complete picture, and then they kind of like onboard them, and then they slowly reveal the realities of the business. So how do you, clearly you're not in the latter
Yep.
category, so how do you handle, because I'm sure in your industry as well there are some gurus who are like, oh, you're gonna become a millionaire in next year,
Yeah.
right? How do you
That's
handle that?
that's society now, though. It's not all the guru's fault. It is because, but they're also playing to what society wants. We live in an instant gratification society. Again, I'm 42 years old. I bought my first house at 23, so year 20 right now. And I've seen that shift. I've seen that through social media and everything else. We live in a time where people want things tomorrow, next week, next month, or they start to lose interest. And I've coached a lot of people myself over the years, and it tends to be difficult because you have the gurus out there that are promising instant gratification. And I don't want to lie to people. Like, this doesn't happen overnight. This is something that happens over a period of time. It happens over years. It happens over a decade. It happens over time. But the beauty that I would emphasize of this is when it does happen, it is really powerful. Like, I can hang it up tomorrow and have enough income coming into my life where I don't need to ask anybody for a job. I don't need to go out and search for any more business. I do it because I love to do it. It's fun. It keeps me young. I have 2 young kids. I want to bring them into the business, but it takes a strong personality. And when I first, and sorry to go off on a tangent here, but when I first got into the business, I used to read everything real estate. I got out of college and I would read Millionaire Real Estate Investor, Rich Dad Poor Dad, blah blah, and I realized I was, the probably the most knowledgeable person in the room when it came to real estate, the game of real estate itself. But then I realized that this is a game of business. This is much more than just real estate itself. When you're running a company, you're, again, a psychologist, a marketer, an acquisition specialist, a financier. You really just need to know a lot of different things to be a good, CEO or business professional.
Yeah. I recently wrote a book, The Land Business, which
Nice.
is like it talks exactly about this, that the land, the land investing world, they treat it as like deals. Oh, I want to do more deals. I want to make more money. But very few people run it like a true business, right? As you said earlier, it requires psychology, it requires well-rounded personality, dealing with like different types of problems. So I completely hear you. I had a question regarding capital. You did say, oh, well, there are players like myself who are well capitalized and we have like an advantage over someone just starting out. How did, when you first started, how did you raise capital and how has it changed over the years versus what you're doing right now?
Yeah, so when we first started off, I started off slow. I mean, again, depending on your crowd we're speaking, I started off with a personal loan, right? A three, I think it was 3.5% down FHA loan. Bought my first one. My wife bought her first three-family FHA as well, 3.5% down, very low down payment. We refinanced out of those after a couple of years, and then used that same exact program to go buy a single-family home. I encouraged brothers to get in, cousins to get in, everybody to, do it. My brother-in-law bought a three-family as well. And then as those properties start to appreciate, we went in and initially started to do cash out refis, pull out loans. I got super aggressive. I don't advise everybody to do this, but I've done lines of credit, I've done business credit cards, I've done everything to get capital to acquire more property. Today, we look a little bit different. We have a large email list, we have a large following where we can go out and we can say, hey, you know what, we have an opportunity where we need $100,000. We need to, we're paying 15% over the next 12 months. We're going to return your money. Here's what we're doing. Here's the plan. Here's the property we're buying. And a lot of times we are able to, through that email list, raise the capital that we need. I would say over the last 10 years, we've probably raised, I don't know, maybe it's probably 30, $40 million, somewhere around there, to do all the, the transactions that we've done.
All through the email list?
For the most part, and again, it comes from that networking. I mean, excuse me, that educational platform as well. Because what we'll find is a lot of times that people will come out and they'll. We just did a rehab tour on a 9-unit building that we're building in East Boston here, and you'll find that people will come out and they'll say, hey, you know what? I have $200,000 in my retirement account or my IRA or my trading account or whatever like that. But through talking to you, I'm realizing that I love my job and I really don't want to pivot away. If I work for Apple or I work for Google or whatever, and I make a decent salary, it doesn't make sense for me to pivot away from my really good career here. If I'm an engineer, if I'm a doctor, to go into acquisitions and marketing and psychology and learning all the things that Willie knows, it makes more sense for me to say, hey, well, if I can get a 15% return, a 12% return, just invest with him. So a lot of times what we'll find is we're bringing people out to educate them about our business, but it through that education, they knowledgeably say, you know what, you're right. This does take a well-rounded person. I'm not cut out for this, but I would like to invest with you guys, if that makes sense. So that list is deal flow, and it's also a source of capital for us as well.
Hmm. We'll dive deeper into the education platform soon, but before we do, how isn't it cheaper to go directly to a bank, because then you can get capital for like say 6 or 7 or 8% instead of paying 12%, right?
We can, but again, but I guess to answer your question or to ask a question to that is, where are you getting the down payment from? So the bank will finance you at 7% or 8%, at 80% loan to value. Where's your 20% coming from? If you have the capital yourself, which again, we told you in Boston here is 100 grand, 200 grand, then that's great. But do you have a million? How do you do 5 deals a year? If you're shelling out 200 grand of your own money, and that's all you have, then you're doing one deal until that money comes back. We like the scalability of having those other private investors. Now I can borrow 200 grand from you, go back to the bank. they'll finance the other 80%, and I can now do 4 or 5 deals at one time, and scale up a little bit faster like that.
I see. So you
So
are using a mix.
I am using a mix. So yeah, so it's bank financing primarily for the 80%, and then 20% will come from some type of private investor, and we do that in two different ways. And again, it can get sticky in a multitude of different ways, but I would say it's either debt or equity. And by that I mean debt is, hey, I need 100 grand. I'm going to give it back to you in 12 months. I'm going to pay you 12 to 15% on it above market, give you a real good incentive to get out and liquidate and bring that over to us. And when we do that, basically what we're saying is we have this killer deal on the table, and we're almost 100% certain that we can fix it up, create our equity, pull that capital back out, and get it right back over to you. And we've essentially bought this property with no money out of our own pocket. The other side is equity. We're 80% sure, 75% sure this is a killer deal, but it might take some additional time outside of that 12 months. We really want to hold on to this for 2 to 3 years and let the market do a little bit of that appreciation for us as well. Would you like to come on? That same 100,000 will turn into a 20% ownership within this property, if that makes sense. So it's debt or equity, and we've been able to source both through our networking.
Which one do you prefer?
I prefer debt because I really, don't get me wrong, is if I can have less cooks in the kitchen, that's always better. Debt is, again, I would prefer debt because it gives you, so the reason I also prefer debt is not because I don't want to work with other people, but I tend to find that if you're not in this business full time, you don't fully understand it. And when things like COVID happen or government shutdowns happen, your investors tend to look at you like, well, you were supposed to perform at XYZ. That what you told me, and I'm like, well, we didn't know that the federal government was going to stop funding to Massachusetts and withhold some of our rents or whatever it may be. We didn't know that there was going to be a global pandemic. So when you're debt, it's a little bit more risky, but I'm able to take on that risk and kind of do it myself, and and not have all the rest of the cooks in the kitchen. And here's some of the things, but sometimes it just doesn't make sense. Sometimes you have to go equity and share in some of that risk.
Right. When you do give out equity, say 20%, they're 20% partner now. Do they still have a say in how you do the rehab and how you set
No,
the rental prices and stuff?
No, when I say cooks in the kitchen, I mean you still want to be respectful. They're still asking questions. They're still commenting. They're still a lot of times in the neighborhood, driving by, taking a look on at things. But at the end of the day, no, we do not give out the authority to question how we're doing the rehab. We're still, when we structure these things, we're the general partner, the general manager. It says within our operating agreement that we have the authority to do X, Y, Z, within limitations. The only thing we don't have the authority to do is go out and borrow extra capital without their consent, or refinance without their consent. And what we do for our equity partners is their capital is always the first out as well. So if we ever sell, their capital comes out first. Proceeds are getting split after that. If we refinance, which is always the goal, is to retain the property, their cash is the first cash out, and then everything else is split from there.
Is that a JV deal or a syndication?
It's structured in a sense like a syndication, but the difference between the way we do it in the syndication is the syndication, I would say 90% of the time, 99% of the time really, is the capital's return through a sale. We try not
Mm.
to sell the property. What we're trying to return capital through a cash out refinance, or some type of cash flows, cumulative cash flows, one of the two. Because our goal at the end of the day is not to syndication is, hey, let's pool our money together. We're going to create some value through our rehab, increase the rents, and then in 5 years the property is going to be worth more. We're going to sell, and everybody's going to get a profit. That's great. I look at that more of as a long-term flip. That's like a 5-year flip in my opinion. There, you
Mm.
still don't have a long-term asset. Our goal is to retain that, get you your money out through really pushing up the values of the rents and the through our construction, and then pulling that money back out, but maintaining the property and now holding on to it and basically cutting you checks for the next 10 to 20 years.
Right. So it is a JV then, right?
It's a JV. Yeah, it's a JV deal. Yeah, basically.
Okay. Um, one clarifying question I had was you mentioned you refinance the property. Does that refinance happen after the rehab is complete and the renters it's already rented out?
It is, yeah. Most of the banks want to see a stabilized product at that point. So we do all of our rehab. So basically, what we do is I would come to you and I would say, and again, keeping it really clean, I need $200,000. We're going to buy this property, and the property needs a significant amount of rehab. I go and get the other $800,000 from the bank, if assuming it's $1 million property. The bank not only gives me that the rest of the acquisition, but they give me the construction loan with that, the construction component with it. We go through our 6 to 9 months to a year of rehabbing the property, rent it back out. And then there's a few different ways that we can do this. We can go to another bank entirely and say, hey, now we have a finished product, get us out of this loan into a more stabilized product. Or the banks know what we're trying to do. So what they'll do is they'll give us basically a loan that converts into a stabilized product after the construction is done, if that makes sense.
Hmm. So it's essentially the way you're running it is you don't put any money out of pocket, right?
I try not to.
Hmm. That's a really great model because then you're essentially acting like as the architect,
Yeah.
right, of the process, and you're sourcing the money from here, from the bank, from investors, and then you bring in contractors, you fix everything up, and then you get start making money,
And you
right?
start making
That's
money. And this is why I say you have to be patient, because a lot of people, you can immediately sell that property. We've created the value. The value is there. We're just choosing to defer our benefits for the long term, right? I mean, if I've bought something at 7, put 2 into it, I'm into it for 9 and it's worth 1.2, you're sitting on $300,000 in equity. You can turn around and sell that property right now. And essentially all you've done is a flip. So it takes a patient person to say, hey, I don't need a Mercedes Benz right now, or I don't need that Maybach or whatever, Lamborghini or whatever it is that you're trying to do right now. I can wait and defer for the long haul. And if you do that over and over and over again, you basically have a business that essentially you haven't put a lot of money into, but is paying you. The downside, or the risky part, is you really need to be good with your finances. You really need to have a real good understanding of where your money is and where your money is going, because when tax time comes, we're going through tax season right now. I have to give all these people, a K1 form and says, hey, this is our loss, this is our profit, this is where the money went, this is where we overran on construction, this is where we saved a little money. You can get into the weeds very, very quickly, and then you can get yourself in trouble if you're playing with other people's money. And we make it sound awesome, and you buying properties with none of your own money, but you just have to really understand that there's a progression to this. That first couple of properties, the first 10, 15 units that I owned, was 100% my money through refinancing, 100% my risk. You really learn the business, you have some time in, and then you scale yourself up with a little bit more of a risky technique, so to speak.
right. So what happens in a scenario when you overrun on construction? Who's funding that extra, say $30,000?
It's a good question. I like that. So overruns are handled in a couple different ways, right? So let's say I borrowed $100,000 from you, and you came back in, and I said, hey, you know what? I overran $30,000 on this particular deal. I've done it a couple ways. I can go back to the bank and say, hey, you know what? We're $30,000 over. That's our primary lender. Can we extend this loan by another $30,000? We can go back to you and say, hey, you know what? On my cash out refi, I can only pull out 70 grand. Would you be interested in staying in for $30,000 for another 12 months? And I'll continue to pay that 12 to 15% on that $30,000 for the next 12 months. Assuming you say no, then my option would be to go find another private lender and say, hey, would you like to come in for $30,000? I pay you 12 to 15% over the next 12 months. Take their money, refinance you out, leave them as the second position private lender. Or I would say option 4 or 5 is I come back to you or another individual and I say, kind of botched this one. I can get your 70 out. Would you be interested in leaving your 30 in, and in exchange for a 15% or a 10% equity position, in this particular property? And again, a lot of times that's very enticing because I've already done all the hard work and I've already de-risked the building at that point. The building is done. We've created $300,000 in equity, and now your $30,000 is immediately worth $45,000 or whatever it may be. We structure it in, so it's an enticing way. So hopefully those
Mm.
things make sense to you. You can either
Yeah.
essentially, keep that debt partner in, refinance that debt partner out, convert that debt partner into an equity partner, or go back to your primary lender and see if they can extend that for a little bit, a little bit further. Or option number five, you say, I botched this property, but remember, a botch means I didn't create as much equity as I thought. I still have enough equity where I can still sell the property and walk away with 200,000, if that makes sense. So let's say I bought at 7, I intended to put 200,000 into it, and it's worth 1.2, but I overran 50,000. I still have $250,000 in equity, and then I just put the property on the market and unload it at that point and say and chop it up
Mm.
to a pretty good loss is essentially what it comes down to. So there's a
Yeah.
multitude of ways we can exit.
So there's no option 7 where like Willie is like, oh, I'm just gonna put my own money in and
No,
just get this done.
that's option 7 as well, and that's why I don't really fear these, because there's so many. If you just kind of open up yourself, a lot of people get so nervous because things are going to go exactly the way they wanted them to,
Mm.
that but you're absolutely right. There's absolutely been an option 7, where I say, you know what, I love this property, I really believe in it. um I want to hold on to it for the long term. I have to dip some money into it, or my wife puts some money into it, or some other form of capital that we can inject that is our own.
Hmm. What happens when things go really wrong? I'm guessing that you have like 130 units.
Hmm.
At least one or two times you like actually lost money, or has it never happened?
No, I've lost money for sure. Yeah. We had Usually when I'm doing the BRRRR strategy, when I'm trying to maintain a property, it doesn't typically go wrong there, because again, we're buying at such a deep discount. Usually when things go wrong, and I've been told this over the years, and it's very difficult philosophy to stick to, is entrepreneurs and business owners tend to get bored. When they do something really, really well, they tend to, get bored and try to steer off course. And what we do, when I tend to lose money, is because I'm steering off course and I try to do something that excites me versus the boring tasks that I've been doing. So we do a lot of condo conversions here. When I say we, I mean the community, the Boston community. All these old triple deckers, 3 families, are over the last, I would say, 30 years have really started to be converted into condos. Not a lot of people own an entire building anymore. A lot of developers will go and they'll really rehab the building and then sell each individual unit off as condos. When we've tried to do that, when we tried to pivot away from our specific business model and go into the condo conversion model, we've either overbuilt for the neighborhood, underbuilt for the neighborhood, took too long to build, and I've lost 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 as a group. And then you also have market downturns. We don't know what the last couple of years. I don't know that I've necessarily call it recession, but it's been weird. It hasn't been what our typical market has been here in Boston. Usually in Boston, what I've seen over my 20-year career is you have rising rents, or you have rent stabilized and you have property values rising. Right now in Boston, we have stabilized rents, property values slightly declining, interest rates still a little high. Political environment is wishy-washy. Rent control talks about coming in. So the market has been very fickle, finicky. And we've recently did a condo conversion where we're now renting out the buildings. There's a few Section 8 tenants that have really, really nice condos that they're living in because we intended to sell them, but they did not sell.
Hmm. So you lose. I mean, you're still making money through rents. You're saying you lost money on paper?
I would say we lost money on paper. We're down 300,000. We're still, maintaining the building, but even the rents that are being brought in do not cover the mortgage on that particular building.
I see. So it's you're negative every month. I
Negative
see.
every month. And again, will we try again when the market improves, or market gives us some indication that we should try again? Yes, we will. But even that's difficult, because as soon as you move in tenants, the building is immediately depreciating. Let's say it's not a single family, so it's not like we're trying to, in order to sell that building, we'd have to get all three tenants out, which is difficult to do. It turns into a tough situation, but you have to do what you have to do. This is the game that we play. This is it's a high stakes game that I look at it as playing real life Monopoly. And
Right.
what I just recently went through was the equivalent of going to jail, essentially.
Hmm. You mentioned lost as a group. You use that term.
Mhm.
What did you mean by that? Lost as a group?
That particular property, I have three other partners with me on that particular deal.
Are those equity or debt partners?
Those are equity partners.
I see. Okay.
Equity partners, and again, this is why it gets kind of there. I love it, and it's very difficult to explain sometimes. They're equity partners, but this was a deal that we came in together. We sourced this piece of property and essentially got the land for almost no money out of our pocket. So they're equity partners, but they're not into it for hundreds of thousands of dollars. I think each one of us has about 10 grand into this particular piece of property. So they're not, though all of us as a group are very disappointed in the performance. It's not like I have an equity partner out there who's just, down $300,000, at this point.
Hmm. So out of pocket was $10,000, but then you also have the loan obligations, right? So you're writing a check essentially every month.
Essentially, we're servicing debt that exceeds the rental income that's coming in. And I would say that the cumulative property value is $300,000 less as a multifamily than what we owe on the property. To give you hard numbers, let's say we owe $2 million on the property. It's a lot to owe on a three family. We intended to sell each of the units individually, which would have been a cumulative sale of 2.4. So we would have made money. The property, we owe about 2 million. I would say the property as a multifamily is worth about 1.7.
Hmm. I see. So now the only strategy is to wait it out.
Let's wait it out.
Okay.
Sucks, but
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
But I mean, that's like I said. So when I've lost, it's usually because I've tried to get creative and do something that wasn't necessarily my bread and butter. My bread and butter has always been the rental market, just fixing them up, get in, get out. When you start, putting fancy appliances in, and I blame myself. It's partly the Instagram world that we live in. Even someone myself, 42, I view myself as a mature, adult, but I still get caught up in some of the glitz and glams that is social media. You see other developers going out there building these beautiful buildings and putting this in and fireplaces and these beautiful finishes, and you want to be part of that as well. So you steer away from some of the things that you've been used to doing. We don't do that. We go in, we put in Frigidaire appliances, basic cabinets. We use the same thing over and over again. We churn. We use the same paint color each and every single rental, and just get in and get out. So a lot of times, I would tell a younger investor is to, stay off of social media. Find something that really
Yeah.
kind of works for you, and you work it well, and stick to it. Be bored. When you're making money, boredom is okay. Just continue to be bored and make that money.
Yeah. So in this condo conversion, you did actually put like fancy appliances and
We
stuff.
put the top
What,
line and everything. It looks better than my house, So
what,
I probably shouldn't have.
what,
We wouldn't have gone that far.
but the hope was that you can charge more rents, right?
No, well, the hope was to sell them as condos. We went high end because we were going to sell them as individual condos, and that's what the
But they
market.
didn't sell.
But they didn't sell. Yeah,
I see.
the market, changed. And again, the problem that you have is these condo conversions don't happen overnight, and from the time that we found the land to putting a shovel in the ground and getting permitted and the building the actual building to the last refrigerator going in is 18-month time span. And that
Hmm.
18 months, Congress changes over, Senate changes over, presidential houses have changed over, interest rates haven't really moved, markets have shifted. There's a lot that happens in an 18-month period where you can go in thinking that market looks pretty good, and then on the other end you find out that it's not. And a lot of it was us as well. I can't entirely blame the market. Boston's a neighborhood or a city where you can have one street that is booming with condos, and everybody wants to be on that street. And you can go literally the street right next, right next to that and right over. And again, I think this is in a lot of cities, and it's not the same vibe. It's not the same community. It's not the same. So we were in that street, one over, and anticipated those buyers coming over, and they did not. So.
Hmm. So when we started this podcast, you mentioned your buy box was essentially fix and hold.
Mhm.
And this example that we're discussing is fix and
So,
resell,
yep,
right? So
exactly.
it was outside your buy box.
It is. It is. It is. And again, and most people think, well, it's the same thing. No, not necessarily. It takes a different mindset, a different understanding. When you're holding, I tell a lot of clients that I work with this, and students that I work with, time fixes a lot of things. You can hold and you can kind of mess things up, but if you hold it for 20 years, those mistakes don't really matter too much anymore. But when
Yeah.
you're buying with the intention of selling, those mistakes immediately show themselves, and that's what we got caught up in.
Yeah. So just to get a better idea, so going back to the splitting the pie on the acquisition side, what percentage of deals that you're doing are like you buying land and doing construction
Mhm.
as opposed to uh buying a dilapidated building and just fixing it up?
Um, 80/20. I would say
80% fix and hold?
80% fix and hold, 20% we're erecting a building from nothing.
Right. And when you're doing erecting the building from nothing, that's a much more complex project,
It
right?
is.
Because then you have to get zoning and all those things
It is, and
involved, permits.
especially in Boston, the neighborhood process is can be difficult. We live in I build Boston's a place where it's not just going to the city and saying, "Hey, this meets zoning code. Can I build here?" The city wants you to go talk to the neighborhood, talk to the abutters, talk to the people in the community, and get not necessarily their approval, but their input, their feedback. And that process, a lot of times, just getting to a meeting with some of these neighborhood associations can be 3, 6, 9 months. And then you gather these letters of support after you've made some adjustments to your design and everything else, and you go back to the architect, and then you go to the city. And that permitting process, if you're lucky, could be another 3 months, to get the actual permit. So from the time that you buy the land, if you are just go, 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 it still might be a year before you actually get that excavator on site to put, anything in the ground. And then our typical building here might take you another 12 months to actually finish a building. And again, that's go, 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 and you're paying attention to that product, that project. It could be longer depending on size and scope, but I would say another 12 months to put the foundation in the ground, frame up to the time that you get that last little bit of paint touch up. So that's a 2-year time span. And again, I would emphasize the fact that there's a lot that can happen in that 2-year time frame, and that's typically why I'm not a big fan of new construction. Sometimes it works really well for us. The benefits are less maintenance, a better product over the long term. Everything is new, so again, it goes back to the less maintenance. But if you ask me, what I would prefer, I would all day long take the gut renovation, go in there, rip everything out in an existing building and put it back. I want to get in and out faster. There are less unknowns. My timetable is a little bit less. I could control my cost a lot more during something like that.
Hmm. When you say gut renovation, are you demolishing the building?
No, when I say gut, I mean I basically just use the shell. Essentially, what it comes down
Oh,
to,
I see.
so essentially we just go out and take everything down to the studs, new electrical, new plumbing.
Okay.
We try to maintain the hardwood floors. A lot of times, our buildings here in Boston built 1910, 1920. A lot of times the hardwood floors are still in good condition. You just need to sand them down and refinish them. But then new roof. Hopefully the siding is good. We put new windows, new decks, and everything else on the buildings. That's considered a gut renovation.
Okay. Does it ever happen where the city is like, well, no, it's too bad of a condition, you need to demolish it?
Not typically. The what you'll find here is the only time that they would say something like that is if it was severely fire damaged, and they
Hmm.
would make you take it down.
Okay. I want you to transition to your educational platform. So that's your second line of business, essentially, right?
It is. It is. Yes, I'm transitioning in year 20 into more of a coach, consultant, educational or educator, here in the space. We've taken on, some clients, here and there that want to learn the business. I do site visits as well. So a client would say, "Hey, I really understand the development business, but I'm caught up in this little bit of pickle right here, or I'm having trouble pushing this permit through. Can you step in and give me some advice?" So, as I'm making the transition at year 20, we're probably going to step back and do a little bit less development ourselves, and assist more of the community in doing stuff like that.
Hmm. What inspired the switch to being a coach?
Um, there, you get to a certain point, and a lot of people, unless you've been there, probably don't understand this. But part of the reason that I did that condo development is because you get bored. You need a new challenge. You need something else that really kind of inspires you. Once a lot of this business and being a business owner and being an entrepreneur is setting aggressive goals for yourself, and when you achieve them, you need to set the next aggressive goal and everything else. So I think making that transition over to coach consultant is my way of kind of just not just giving back, but also kind of challenging myself to see if I can help other people build in this business as well. I know I can do it. I've done it. I've proven that. But can I also assist and help other people kind of build in this business as well? And it also, not to sound cheesy, but it also feels better as well. Like that next three family or that next development project doesn't have the same appeal to me as me seeing somebody with their eyes wide open, like, I didn't know I can do this. This is incredible. This is, I just built a building from the ground up. So it's just, I don't know, just it sounds cheesy and sounds corny, but it's that feeling that you get from assisting other people, is also
Hmm.
awesome as well.
Do you think it's possible 50-year-old Willie looks back at this and says, "Oh, this was like another shiny object syndrome thing where if I just stayed focused on my fix and hold, I would have been much richer."
I thought about that, but again, if you so that's a good question. But I'll rewind it and I'll say, 25-year-old Willie, what did you set out to do, and what were the goals then? And if you talk to 25-year-old Willie, he would say, "Man, you've done it. You've accomplished everything that you wanted to do." I grew up in poverty. I came from a situation where my father's been gone since I was 5 years old. So my goals were to buy my mother a house. My mother lives in a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house by herself. The only time she ever uses those bedrooms is my kids go over to see her. I bought my in-laws a house. We have a vacation home. I'm learning to fly, right now. My wife has a good job. We live comfortably. Kids are in private school. You've done it. I've checked all the boxes. So I think what a lot of people get caught up in just my opinion, is that they're always raising the bar. There's always a new bar, and you continue to push that bar further and further. So I don't know. It's hard to tell. That's part of life, I guess. Is the idea is I don't you don't really know until you get there. But I would say no, as to answer your question right now.
Hmm. Like, why is the goal not go from 130 units to 1,300 units?
Um, Stress, unnecessary, unnecessary growth, getting to a point where we're bringing on too many cooks in the kitchen, too many other voices, too many problems and everything else. And I think even the reason when we first started talking is just doubling in size. Even that is not necessarily to an arbitrary number. That purpose of doubling in size is because I'm bringing in family members and my brother. A lot of that is helping him get to a point where my niece and nephew are in a good position. I have two other brothers with another niece and another nephew. So it's more or less it's just a family business, and I feel like if we get to 200 something units, everyone's living a good life. Everyone is financially secure, and the unknowns are really kind of taken out as this is to go deeper a little bit to answer your question. I think through my financial career, I've worked in banks and I've sold cars and everything else. And one of the things that I've learned through working in the banks and the financial services industry is that the biggest thing that takes people out is kind of these unknown issues. It's COVID, it's cancer, it's medical bills, it's a lot of things like that. I think we get to a certain point where those unknowns that we can cover, an unexpected medical emergency and everything else without, dipping into to funds. That's really where we want to be. And after that, I don't know that we want to continue to grow too much further.
Hmm. Speaking of funds, completely different fund. Have
Mhm.
you looked into like what is it called, like 506 or whatever, where you raise capital through accredited investors? Have you looked at that structure as well?
We have, and again, it all depends on where you want to go with your business. So I would answer your questions as I'm sitting here thinking about it. I would say not regret, but my answers may change at 50 only because, or I would say a little bit, maybe a little bit older, because my kids will be getting out of college at that point. And if they wanted to get into the business and said, "Hey, Dad, let's continue to grow this thing," now it's more or less not about the money. It's more or less how can I help them? How can I assist them? How can I continue to push them forward? And keep the family business, going. But from a personal standpoint, no. And to answer your question, I have, but I think it comes down to um, your goals, your growth goals, and I think that you start to get into a complex equity raise structure. You need attorneys. There's a lot of money there. The SEC is now watching you. A whole bunch of other things. I don't really want to go down that path. I want to keep the government out of my business as much as possible. I've been in the SEC's office, and it is not a fun place to be. So
Wait, do you want to tell the story why you've been in the
I
SEC
shouldn't have
office?
went into that one. I used to work in the financial services industry. I used to be a licensed stockbroker. I never sold stocks and bonds, but I was licensed because I was in compliance. I went to Northeastern, went to finance school. I was in compliance, so I basically worked for a securities firm, and I would go around and fly around the country and audit offices of the financial consultants. And my job was basically to say, "Hey, you're doing okay," or "Hey, don't do that. This woman is 75 years old or 80 years old. You're continuing to sell her risky products. You're going to get yourself and us in trouble as a firm." So that was my job. So I'm very familiar with the financial services industry. And why I ended up in the SEC's office is because my signature was on a lot of those documents. When I flew to those offices of those financial consultants, it was my job to say, "Yes, okay, you can proceed as what you're doing," and blah blah. So the firm that I was working for got in trouble many years later, after I had left, and the SEC called me in. It was probably one of the scarier days of my life. My wife drove me down to the SEC's office, big SEC symbol. There are two attorneys, a stenographer, a couple other people from the SEC with their badges on, and we're sitting down at the table. And the first question they asked me is, "Do you want an attorney?" And I'm like, I don't have anything to hide, man. So no, I don't. I don't need an attorney. My wife's downstairs in the car. She's worried about whether I'm going to come out of there in cuffs or not. It was definitely a scary day, but so I've been in there, and so I would prefer to stay away from anything where the Securities and Exchange Commission is involved.
So how did it end?
It ended with them. It ended. Well, it was a couple times where again, remember, I'm 42 right now. When I was doing this work, I was in my early 20s. I would say 25 or something like that, right? So life is a joke at the end of the day. And I remember them sliding something across the table to me, and they were like, "Hey, do you remember talking to this lady?" And I'm going to say her name is Alice now, and talking about blah blah blah. And I said, "No, I don't remember that." And they slid some things across the table to me, and it was like clearly an email that I had written, and I kind of laughed out loud or something like that, and didn't really wasn't really taking things seriously. It ended with the firm getting fined, but clearly I did not end up incarcerated. So I was like, I don't know, and I was no longer in the industry any longer. So I think they took that under consideration. They also understood that, to go deeper, just for a quick second, is in the industry, compliance, my job, and sales are in direct conflict with one another. So there are what you're supposed to be doing, and there's pushing sales, pushing the brokerage up further, making more money. My argument to them was, "Hey, I know what I was supposed to be doing, but in this particular office, the sales manager's office was right next door to mine. There was a lot of conflict. There's supposed to be a firewall. And by a firewall, to describe what that means, is I shouldn't even be in the same location as the sales representatives. I should not be in direct contact with them because that is a conflict of interest. And they are now trying to, if they're writing, a particular deal, and it's my job to say, yes, this deal goes through, or no, it doesn't, and we're having lunch together, those two things are at conflict. So I think they understood that there was that firewall that was supposed to be there wasn't there, and kind of forgave some of the things that I maybe signed off on that I probably should not have.
Hmm. Oh, I saw now. I see why you're so against funds. You're like scarred now with that
I
experience, right?
am. I am. So no funds. No, I don't want to have. I don't want to be in the SEC's office. I understand that. I want to keep things, and that also comes back to your growth question. I want to. My fear, and again, I think that growth, when you're constantly moving and trying to get bigger, you can make the smallest mistake, and that mistake snowballs into criminal activity. That's what I've seen through my financial career. I personally, for those of you who remember, a gentleman named Bernie Madoff, who had one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in American history. I don't think that Bernie Madoff started as a Ponzi scheme. I don't think his intention was to go and rip a bunch of people off, because in 2008, in 2009, 2010, Bernie Madoff was just the most popular, but there were hundreds of Ponzi schemes or hundreds of smaller Bernie Madoffs just like him doing the same exact thing across the country. And I don't think that their intention was ever to rip people off. I think it's we lost a little money. Let's bury it underneath this. Okay, we lost a little bit more money. Let's continue to bury it. And then all of a sudden it turns into a Ponzi scheme. So grow. Sometimes isn't always the best. Sometimes you have to look internally, in my opinion, and say, what do I want out of life? Have I checked those boxes? Well, then why am I continuing to go shoot for the moon?
Hmm. Here's an alternative strategy I wanted to think through with you. So, say right now, most of the deals you're doing are fix and then you rent them. So, fix and hold.
Mhm.
If we were to take the rent option away, say, all right, Willie, you're not allowed to, let's just forget about renting. All we're going to do is we're going to fix it and then we're going to sell it.
Mhm.
Right. So, if we switch the business model, then it kind of like frees up the capital, right? Because then you get the returns back within like 12 to 18 months, and then you can keep redeploying and become bigger in theory. What's wrong with that business model? Or do you think it's just more stressful?
Taxes.
Taxes.
You make 100 grand, the government is going to immediately come in and take their 50% right off the rip. 100 grand isn't 100 grand. 100 grand is 50 grand. At the end of the day, the difference between that business model and my business model is this: when you have equity, you can go and borrow money, not as much, but you can go and borrow money tax free. And it's essentially money into your pocket, but I'm taking it as additional debt versus income. If I take it in income, Fed, state, FICA, Medicare, unemployment, or self-employment tax, it ends up being in some states 40%. 100 grand ends up being 40 grand that actually goes into your pocket. At the end of the day, so you really have to. You make $1 million, you really only made $500,000. At the end of the day, so that's I'm 100%, it's crossed my mind, and I understand where you're coming from. But if there were no taxes, you would be 100%. I'd be 100% on board with that business model. But unfortunately, taxes are a factor. And if you look at compound interest, and if you look at money compounding, if you take out the tax, it compounds much slower. You leave the tax in and defer it, so some future date, it compounds a lot faster, and then I'll worry about taxes in my 60s.
Or never.
Or never.
If you don't sell.
Exactly. Or never. Exactly. Right.
Right.
Exactly. And that's so taxes is the answer to your question.
Yeah. Um, One question I didn't, just for the context for the viewers, how big, like in terms of employees, how big is the company, both the education one and the fix and rent one?
On the educational side, we have 5 people with us, 2 virtual assistants. One is focused mainly on social media. One is focused mainly on media for me, putting me on podcasts, putting me out into. I've been in the New York Times, been in Business Insider, Yahoo Finance, a bunch of different things. And then we have a couple of guys who are more boots on the grounds, photography, videography, and then managing the day to day in terms of putting up meetings and going out and organizing new spots for us to venues for us to do and everything else. On the property management side, we have there are 5 of us who are full time, and there are probably another 4 or 5 of us who are independent contractors but work with us. Their primary source of income would be us.
So
And
you're
then
running a
sorry,
very lean team.
virtual. We don't even have an office. Very
Mm.
virtual. We used to have an office. We gave it up. I would say maybe 6 or 7 years ago. Almost like it was a couple of people thought I knew COVID was coming because I gave up my office almost like the year or two before that, and they were really questioning my where the business was going with that.
Mm.
We just don't need it anymore. We everything's virtual. Everything is online nowadays. When I was getting into the business, we used to sign a lot of deals on the hood of my car, pen and paper,
Mm.
wet signatures. Everything's DocuSign now, dot loop. There's no need. I was paying for an office. I wouldn't say it was $2,500 or $3,000. I was paying for dual internet service between my office and my home. I was paying for heat and electricity and power and everything else. And I said, this is kind of silly, and here we are, 6 or 7 years later, and we continue to keep it really lean.
Mm. Okay. You mentioned your biggest constraint was hiring and firing, more specifically, property managers, right? So how are you thinking of solving that?
Keeping it a revolving door, meaning we're never done hiring. Um, I think that's the best solution I have to the problem is what we tend to find is that we have a good situation, and then someone leaves and now we're in a scramble. I've been told that when you find good people, you need to find a place for them within your business. And that's the mindset that I'm kind of shifting to. I'm not necessarily looking to fill a hole. I am going out there and constantly talking to people that want to be in this business, that want to be in this space. And if they are really talented, we need to find a place. Sometimes you're going to have more talent than you need in a particular situation. And sometimes you're going to have a little bit less, but I think that's the approach that I'm going to have to take moving forward.
So these are property managers. They are like property managers that are independent contractors, or they have their own companies, or these are property managers that you're paying for them.
We're paying for them. Everybody, we essentially myself, we manage everything in house. As I'm talking to you right now, I probably have 2 maintenance calls that have come in. Hopefully not, but I mean, like I said, we manage everything in house. I hired outside property managers, in the past, and it just didn't work out. And I think part of the problem is me. I'm a control freak. And not only am I a control freak, I also know the cost of things. And I've said this before. If you are a property manager and you're charging $550 to put in a new toilet and you know nothing about construction, some people may think that's a pretty decent deal. But me, I know that a toilet at Home Depot costs $100, and it's 2 bolts and a wax ring that's going to take you 20 minutes to put in. I don't have the capacity to pay you another $400 for labor within that. So
Yeah.
we take everything. We take a lot of it in house. I've taken back control over the entire portfolio. So those people we're hiring are all working for J&J companies
Right.
directly.
So these people, you're when you hire them, they're like some kind of a handyman, or some previous experience, and then you bring them in house, or are
Yeah.
you like training people in house?
A little bit of both. My brother has really taken the reins to our maintenance side of the business, our construction and maintenance side. He runs most of our construction job sites and handles most of our maintenance. And then he has about 6 or 7 team members that work underneath him as independent contractors. So they're everything from cleanup guys. Hey, we just had a tenant, move out and just wreck the place. We need somebody to kind of go in there and do a quick clean out, to we trained our guys on basically, we were a locksmith might cost you $300 or $400 to change it. We use all digital codes on everything. We don't have any keys anymore to install a new digital lock and put in new codes or whatever it may be. So we trained all of our guys to install those locks. Everybody walks around now with a drill, and most of our team knows how to install those locks, change the codes, and do everything else. So it's a little bit of both. We have independent contractors. We have a plumber that is not in our house, but again, he gets 75% of his business comes from our properties at the end of the day. So
Mm. Does it ever cause like conflict of interest? Like if you have equity partners, they might like mistakenly assume that, oh, Willie's contractors are all in-house and they're overcharging and then they're taking more, like that kind of thing.
it could be. We have yet to have any real conflict with equity partners, we are aware of the optics, especially because it's a family-owned business as well, and my brother's involved, my sister's involved. So when I'm writing checks, I'm very aware of um, documentation. It's, hey, my sister went to court for XYZ property today. She's been paid, blah, blah, blah. So I'm writing the court date, the tenant, everything. I'm really just trying to document as much as I possibly can. So a year from now or 2 years from now, if we need to refer back, hey, why was Willie's sister paid XYZ? We have a real good, clean trail of paperwork, there to the document. But for the most part, they're seeing the returns that we've promised, and when those things happen, you don't really have too much of a conflict. There's, even when I would say, even if it wasn't my family, there's always going to be conflicts in business because there are contracts awarded to friends and cousins and everybody else who owns a business. I mean, that's the way the government works as well. The government's always giving contracts to we call it corruption here, but the government's always giving contracts to someone's friend or someone's your friend's husband runs a construction company or whatever like that. Now I'm speaking really specifically, but so to answer your question, no, we haven't had a direct conflict, but we are very aware of the optics and make sure that we document as much as we can to make sure that if it ever does come up, we have a real good train of
Mm.
paperwork to follow and justify anything that we're doing.
Mm. So yeah, Willie, we covered a lot. One final question I wrote down for you was regarding what we were discussing. How do you like handle when they're like bad tenants, like someone trashing your property, or do you have like a strong screening process? Like how do you manage that? Because I'm sure you have done so many units, you've probably dealt with all of them, right?
Yep. We just talk about bad neighborhoods, and I don't think it's a bad neighborhood, but I would talk about, we just, not to go too deep, but we just evicted a known prostitute in our
Mm.
one of our buildings. It was a tough eviction. There's this one building that we have, and the 3 buildings to the right and the 2 buildings to the left, me and all of the other owners are also on a text message, and us all we're basically talking about is how do we get this woman out of here because she's wreaking havoc throughout the entire block. On the front end, did we know that she was in this business? No, of course not. We wouldn't have let her in. Is there a possibility that she got into this business after gaining access to the property?
Mm.
Possibly. But long story short, it was a couple years. Not only was she doing her business, in the property, but she was also attracting a lot of other criminals to the particular property as well. So it's been well documented. I have video from common areas. I have complaints from other tenants. Other landlords have video coming in and out. It's a process. We do a lot of vetting on the front end. We use Appfolio as our property management software. We do a thorough background check. If we're really worried about you, we're going to drive by your old place of residence, call your old landlord. Maybe it doesn't matter. Especially when you're doing volume, how much of a background check, you're always going to have a few bad apples. That's really what it comes down to. You hope they're not as bad as a prostitute living in your building, but you're going to have some bad apples. We do our best to vet on the front end. How do I handle it? that's where the psychology comes in. That's why you really need to be in tune with yourself. You really need to understand that part of business. If we have 100 tenants, 3 of them are going to be problems, at the end of the day,
Mm.
and how bad, it really comes down to it. People, when they're applying for apartments, it's almost like a job interview, right? They're going to put on their best face. They're going to put on their best clothes. They're going to come and they're going to see and they're going to say all the right things, just like you would during a job interview. Once
Right.
you get hired, the
Yeah.
boss will figure out, what exactly your true intentions are. So, hopefully, I mean, that's a vague answer to your question, but you deal with it. Is the question. I've had some really good tenants over the years where they clean up the place and never caused any problems and are thankful and and just really just were great people. And then you have some really bad tenants where this particular woman, at the as the constable comes in, his gun is drawn. We had to kick in the door because she wasn't letting us in. And as of today, the place is, boarded up and we're waiting for things to cool down, so to speak,
Mm.
before we go in and do any renovations and put a new tenant in there.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Um, e- so you're in retrospect, you think you could have like caught it on your front end checks, or you think it was not possible?
I don't think so. I never. It's hard to go back and try to second guess your decisions. As you're going through. Um, I don't know. I take. Sometimes you take the lumps, you get punched in the face, and you keep moving. And it's a decision that you have to make. If you overthink it, you start to doubt yourself. You start to. I don't want to. Um, overthink the business at the end of the day. I look at statistics. If we start getting up to 100 units and there's 10 bad apples, okay, then something needs to change. 7 bad apples, something needs to change. But I understand statistics. And, if you put 100 random people in a room, you walk into a supermarket and there's 100 people in there, 2 or 3 of them are probably criminals. maybe,
Yeah,
maybe more.
yeah,
So I mean, that's just, we do our best to vet on the front end, be as professional as possible. But like I said, sometimes things are going to slip through the cracks.
yeah. Willie, this has been great. Thank you so much for spending time with us, and congratulations on your success. I mean,
I
you
appreciate
clearly
it.
achieved more than most people. So I applaud you for that. If anyone is watching this and they're like, well, Willie seems like a cool guy, I want to hang out with him, I want to learn from him, or, I want to be an equity partner with him, what's the best place for them to reach out?
Yeah, it's Willie Mandrell, WillieMandrell.com, WillieMandrell.com. And if you're in the Boston area, or if you're not, because we do a lot of Zoom meetings as well, it's BostonWealthBuilders.com. You can join the group, it's free. We do a lot of educational events. If you're even anywhere in New England area, I would encourage you to join. But one of those 2 sites, WillieMandrell.com or BostonWealthBuilders.com.
Willie, it has been a pleasure. Thank you
I
so much.
appreciate it. Thank you for having me.